Substance use is a public health issue having a major impact on individuals, families, and communities. Today's talk is a collaborative effort between the Forsyth County Schools and the Forsyth County Drug Awareness Council to educate parents and community members about substance use. You're going to be hearing information from those who have experienced substance use in their families, as well as community-based substance use experts. So before we get started, I just want to have our panel introduce themselves, and we'll start here with Deputy Chatham.
I'm Deputy Brian Chatham. I'm with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, and I'm a drug recognition expert in the state of Georgia.
I'm Matt Meyer, and I'm the Program Director for the Insight Program.
I'm Heather Hayes. I'm a licensed professional counselor and an interventionist here in Atlanta, and I also am a person in long-term recovery.
I'm Steve Jaffe. I'm a professor of child and adolescent psychiatry at Emory, and I'm the clinical director at Atlanta Insight.
I'm Sherry Agiluni, and I'm the parent of a recovering addict in Forsyth County.
And I'm Jeff Cheney, principal at North Forsyth High School, the host of this event here, and very proud of that. And my 23rd year of education, and have served on numerous committees to address substance abuse in schools.
And thank you so much for hosting us today. So as part of today's discussion, we'll address current community prevention efforts, steps parents can take if they suspect that their child is using substance use, and also those concerns. So the first question we're actually going to send over to Dr. Jaffe, and the question is this. Dr. Jaffe, how do you think that marijuana use affects the emotional and mental development of an adolescent?
Well, first of all, marijuana is not a benign drug. There is no such thing as a benign drug. You need to understand that there, much to my surprise, having raised two teenagers, there is brain growth in the teenage years. There is myelinization of these long tracts. There is pruning so that certain nerves get stronger. And there is this neurological development that is affected by marijuana. Marijuana is a drug that is mainly concentrated when it's smoked. And by the way, the marijuana now is 10 times stronger than it was 10 years ago. When it's smoked, it predominantly, the tetrahydrocannabinol molecule goes to the cortex for thinking. It affects the hippocampus, so it affects memory, and it affects motivation. So it's not a benign drug. And in fact, there's a study that has shown smoking marijuana once a week for 2 years as a teenager will drop your IQ 5 to 8 points in your 20s. I mean, that's phenomenal. So teenagers that want a lower IQ, please smoke marijuana if you want to preserve your brain. And what I thought is that during the teenage years, this is a vulnerable period for brain growth. And marijuana is going to affect that in ways that it will not do if you do it into your 20s and 30s. So we get, every pothead tells me it affects his short-term memory. Had a teenager pothead, great musician, played his guitar, created all this music. And as he told me, if he did it when he was stoned, he couldn't remember what he created when he was then sober to write it down. So it didn't do him much good. It's not a benign drug in that type of way. The other thing, just, and I don't want to take over here, but the other thing is that it does affect driving. The message with teenagers driving is, that's a major accomplishment and gives you independence and all that good increased self-esteem. Marijuana, smoking pot does affect driving. The comments are if you're drunk, you run the red lights. If you're stoned on pot, you stop at the green lights, okay? You get extra careful, and it does affect it. A low level, this has only recently been recognized, a low level of marijuana, just smoking one joint, by the way, a single joint lasts a week in your brain. A chronic smoker, 2 to 3 times a week, it's fat soluble, so it lasts a month. Low level of alcohol, have a beer or two, smoke some pot. You don't have a level of alcohol that is above 0.8, which would be drunk driving, but you are as impaired. Little bit of pot, little bit of alcohol, that mixture means death on the road. You are driving impaired as if you were fully drunk. That's just a short comments.
Yeah, it's eye-opening, so thank you for that. Let's send this next question over to Matt. Matt, let me ask you this. Do you think that marijuana use can progress to the use of other drugs?
Absolutely. I know that in my own experience as a teenager using drugs and alcohol, my primary drug of choice was marijuana. And my friend group was filled with other drug users. And the more kids that I got high with, the more I got introduced to other drugs. And after a period of, I think for myself, it was about a year of smoking pot on a regular basis, I saw all of my other friends that I was using drugs and alcohol with using things like LSD, prescription drugs, and nothing in my mind bad was happening to them. Matter of fact, I was hearing all these wonderful, fun stories of what happened to them when they used drugs and alcohol. So all of a sudden, due to that negative peer influence, I was willing to step outside of what I was already doing and up the ante. So it is in my personal belief that adolescents and young adults experimenting with marijuana and having regular use of marijuana will, in a lot of cases, increase to other drugs. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good answer. Heather, I'm going to throw this question your way if you don't mind. What do you think were the factors that led to this epidemic of prescription drug use that we've seen?
Well, I think there are a lot of things. One, I think, is accessibility and availability. So when doctors prescribe, they often prescribe large amounts, 30, 60, 90 opiates for a wisdom tooth coming out. So there's a lot of peer pressure around. Kids are taking risks. Most have started with marijuana, but some have just started right with the prescription pills because there's this belief that because doctors have prescribed it, it's safer and it's okay. So parents have, over the years, not known. We've worked hard to raise awareness about how important it is to throw away and dispense of properly extra opiates that are around. So we've had a lot of reckless prescribing, a lot of pills laying around in parents' cabinets that kids have had accessibility to, and then a lot of peer pressure that I think impacts others using as well. A lot of kids, though, start in very ways that are fairly innocent. They have an injury. A lot of the heroin addicts that we're seeing today started out as athletes, and they have some sort of injury and are prescribed opiates. It's not monitored. They've had other stressors in their life, maybe a family history of addiction. They're vulnerable. And then they become addicted. And because of the way that the government has come in and helped try and regulate opiate prescribing more, they've also found that heroin is a lot quicker to go to. It's cheaper, $5, a hit. And so I think that's led into our heroin epidemic today.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's really insightful. Thank you. Matt, I don't mean to keep picking on you. Sure. But let me ask you a question that's a tough one to answer, so no pressure.
Okay.
But I know it's something that we all get asked, and if I'm a parent, I'm going to ask this question. And so, as a parent, what do I do to prevent my child from using drugs or alcohol?
I don't know if there's anything that any parent can do that will absolutely guarantee preventing their child from drug and alcohol use. I wish I had that answer, and if there's anyone else on the panel that has that answer, I'd be all ears to it. What I do know is that there are things that parents can do to stay involved in their kid's life, to have an honest, open relationship. And I always tell parents, trust your gut. If you feel like something's wrong, if you feel like something's going on, listen to your gut. If you catch your kid getting high one time, there was probably 100 other times that you didn't catch them. Although there's not any one form of parenting that's going to prevent a child from ever using drugs and alcohol. I grew up in a very loving home with parents that loved me very much, that were there for me, that went to all my ice hockey games growing up. I went to church with my family every Sunday. My parents did everything right. I still hopped out the window at 13, 14 years old and smoked that first joint without my parents knowing. So how can you blame that on my parents? You can't. And I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I do think that understanding that the world that we live in and that how available drugs and alcohol are to our youth, that risk is always going to be there. But the more that you can have those open lines of communication with your child about drugs and alcohol, and the more willing you are to look at the situation honestly with eyes wide open, If something does start to go in the wrong direction, you'll be able to catch it sooner rather than later.
If I could join in on that conversation, at the school, we deal with a lot of first-time situations or aha moments with families where it's been discovered that their child is using or experimented, basically. And the advice we give them is to consistently keep relaying your family or your core values and principles as a family. Because the more you try to stay on top of them or, constantly monitor what they're doing, sometimes that pushes them further away. And so it's a real balance, but we always talk to them about coming back to, in our family, we believe in healthy lifestyles, we believe in this, and to be able to model that is so important. But I agree with you that there is no magic solution here to that. But for us, it's always about open lines of communication and conversation, consistently impressing upon your child your values as a family.
That's a great answer, or a great point, Jeff. I appreciate it. Let me ask anyone who kind of wants to take this in response.
There is no book. That's why every week a new book comes out telling you how to parent your child, how to raise a genius, or whatever it is, be this, be that. We could have this panel discussion. If I had the answer and could write the book, we'd be on my yacht instead of here in Forsyth County. But it's all parents can do is love and limits. You love your children, be involved with them, connect with them, and they have to be able to say no to things. I had a drug addict teenager who told me that he was coming in at 3 a.m. in the morning and drunk, stoned, pills, ecstasy, everything, coming in at 3 in the morning, and he said to me, and my parents didn't care enough to say anything. Even though they yell and scream, and the whole purpose of middle adolescence is to say it's my parents, that's what's wrong in my life, they don't give me enough freedom, and the parents have to use their judgment and their best values to balance that love and let them experience things, but also to be able to say no. I always talk about that, and that when teenagers say to me, trust me, and my answer is, why should I trust you? You're a teenager. I know I've been a teenager. You're going to do wacky things and whatnot. My answer to that is, show me. Show me you can be responsible. Show me you can go to school. Show me you can do your homework. Show me you can come in at 11 o'clock on Friday. Show me, and then I can be able to let the limits be more flexible. But this business of trust me, that's a manipulative, type of thing.
Gotcha.
I always say trust but verify, and I'm a big believer in urine drug tests for parents who are wondering or questioning. It's the only way we truly know if a teen is using or not, is by a hair test or a drug test. And it's absolutely okay for parents to ask for that.
My parents drew a line in the sand with drug use, and I advocate for that all of the time. From the very first time my parents caught me caught me getting high, they made very clear to me that using drugs and alcohol and living under their roof was unacceptable, period. It was a line in the sand, and I knew they weren't bluffing. That set the stage for the boundaries and me getting help as they continued to unfold that there was a problem.
That's a great point. So trust and verify, lean on to family values.
Show me.
And show me, absolutely. Great stuff. And we're going to move on from this question real quick, and I'll come back to you. But let me ask this kind of follow-up in general. Anyone can kind of take this, but I'm a parent. I caught my child using, and I know that I need to lean into them even harder now than I was before as a parent. So can I overreact? Can a parent overreact in this situation?
One of the things I think that happens is that parents put themselves in a position where they feel like they're supposed to be diagnosticians. So they come in and they'll either say, I think he has a problem or she doesn't have a problem. And one of the things I think is really important to note is that there are people out there who do nothing but help evaluate whether a person has an addiction issue or not. So I don't really believe you can overreact. If I had a lump on my arm, I could go to the doctor and he could say it's just a big puffy bruise, you overreacted, but it could also be a tumor. So again, I think it's parents' responsibility to go outside of trying to figure it out themselves and get the help available. Addiction counselors, addictionologists, psychiatrists, there are lots out there that can help.
That's great. Sherry, would you have thoughts on
Yeah, I was going to say on the question about how do I prevent my child from using, I get asked this all the time.
that? Yeah.
As a parent that's been there, so they're basically saying, how do I not end up like you? And there are some things that you could do that we didn't do because we didn't know to do. So I think we watched our kids closely. We were very involved in our kids' lives. We did the same thing Matt's parents did. We went to all their games, went to church. You know, I think they were raised with good moral values. But one thing, we knew that our oldest, who ended up a drug addict, we knew that he had risk-taking tendencies. He was also a hockey player, and he was a lacrosse player. He was just that no-fear guy. So that was a good clue to us that he might be more prone to trying something like drugs. It just that drugs weren't really on our radar. So we spent a lot of time talking about not having sex, abstinence, and not as much time on drugs because it wasn't something that we grew up with. So we didn't have the personal experience and we didn't have the knowledge, so we didn't really feel comfortable talking about it. And I think you really need to be smarter than your kids in this area. The information that Dr. Jaffe and Dr. Davidson just gave, you have to know more than they do about drugs, about what that effect is going to be on the brain, because their brain is still growing until they're 25. If I knew then what I know now, I'm a world of information to my friends that ask me, but I didn't have that information 10 years ago when I needed it. Talk early and often, drug test or have it out. Make sure they know before they're caught that there's a no drug policy in the house, and then don't supply alcohol. There's a lot of parents that think it's okay to give them a drink at home because, I'd rather teach them tolerance, and not over drinking at home, and I don't think that's a good idea.
One way I think parents overreact is if an adult reaches out to you and says, I have concerns about your child. In our roles, we do that quite often. Here's what has been reported to us, or here's what we've discovered. And then you shut down as a parent and say, that's crazy, my child would never do that, and completely dismiss that instead of using that as an opportunity to have a quality conversation with your child. That's how I see sometimes folks overreacting, and that goes with friends and peers too, because many times if we do catch our children using or experimenting, it's with a group of friends. And so then we get in that conundrum of, do we reach out to the other families? Do we address this in our neighborhood? And my advice is yes, reach out to the other families. Hey, I'm not being critical here or judging anyone, but here's what I've discovered, and I just want to share it with you more than anything else.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so really good point, because you're talking about overreaction the other way, and so you're getting defensive, you're taking it personal that something's going on with your child, and you're pushing away help, which is a really, really great point. So let's move over to Deputy Chatham here. Tell us a little bit about what our local law enforcement is doing about the prescription drug epidemic and or the heroin, like Heather was talking about, that's kind of followed up behind it.
Okay. I've been in the county for going on 11 years now. I've worked at the sheriff's office, and most of the time that I've been in the sheriff's office, I've been a K-9 officer, so I deal directly with drug trends and things that are taking place within Forsyth County. One thing that the sheriff's office started noticing as we were going to schools, doing school searches, we started noticing that we were finding marijuana now in our middle schools. And we knew that we had issues with that, on top of finding different types of illicit narcotics in our high schools through our drug searches. So what we decided to do is that it was time to start getting to those 7th and 8th graders before they got to high school to start teaching them about what drugs are. And it wasn't your typical your DARE program where that has its place and it's great. This was real life versions. These were officers that were coming in and giving stories about what these drugs actually do. And the reason that we started thinking about this and doing it this way was, as parents, I'm a parent, I have 2 smaller children, and I'm in the process of teaching them what right and wrong, what they need to do and how they need to do it. But when I started thinking about how I talked to them and spoke to them about different things, I started realizing that at the heart of the problem, when the decision is made, whether they smoke marijuana, whether they do heroin, I won't be there. That decision, I won't be anywhere around. It'll be friends, that they have trust in, that are going to be telling them, hey, let's do this. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to start a program that we were able to talk to the children real life. This is what's going to happen if you use this drug. This is what's going to happen. Because at the end of the day, we can be the best parents that we can possibly be, but at the end of the day, the decision's based off of them. They have to make the decision whether they want to use drugs or whether they want to stay on what we would like to call the straight and narrow. So we started that program at Riverwatch Middle School, started teaching in their PE division. I taught a lot of the classes, and now we've moved on to different areas of middle school teaching, and that's really helping. I believe that if we can get the word out that, hey, drugs are truly not good for you, and these are the reasons why, not just because parents say, hey, don't do this, because I know as a teenager, I was rebellious. My mom and dad told me not to do something, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to try my best to do the opposite. So you always try to give them that real life experience. On a broad scale of things, with prescription pills and how it's moved to the heroin epidemic, it's because it started because it's socially acceptable with prescription pills. And that's a big thing that even when you deal with people that are under the influence of illicit narcotics, a lot of the time, I know a lot of people on the panel, y'all deal with it with sometimes when they may not be under the influence, but they're long-time addicts. Typically, when I deal with them, they are at their peak of highs. They are as high as they're going to get for that day. And that's when I have contact with them, and that's when we get them for DUI or drug possession. And sometimes you see that a heroin addict, they just can't help it. It is truly a disease. It is truly something that takes apart their body, and they have no other reason but to use. So it takes a special kind of officer to be able to deal with that and not just take them to jail, whereas they need some help along the way. And it takes a special officer to kind of realize what's taken on with their body. So we reach out a lot to the people that prescribe, the doctors. We talk to them. We tell them what they're doing by, prescribing 90 pills for a tooth. We describe to them what that's going to do, and we try to make them on our team to where we can have an equal playing field to where they're not just prescribing when it's really not necessary. Another thing that we do is, just like I told you, socially acceptable and also readily available. That is a big term that I use when I teach, is readily available, because a lot of times you hear marijuana is the gateway drug to other types of drugs. Well, why is that? The reason that is because marijuana is socially acceptable, and it's also readily available. Marijuana is everywhere. It's in every walk of life. It affects every single person that is around marijuana, so it's socially acceptable for them to do that. That's where prescription pills come in. They're legally prescribed by a doctor. It's got to be okay that we're using this. And believe it or not, drug addicts, they actually take into effect, they actually categorize themselves. If I'm using prescription pills, I'm a lot better than the person that's using an intravenous needle to get my fix or to get my high. So the sheriff's office got together and we started doing prescription banks, to where, as parents, people that were prescribed those 90 pills and only use 35, what do we do with them? Do we flush them down the toilet? No, you bring them to us. And we have banks all across the county at our precincts. You throw those prescription pills in there, we'll dispose of them for you, that way that they're no longer readily available. So those are some different programs, different things that the sheriff's office is doing to assist in the epidemic of prescription pills and heroin.
That's great. Thank you so much. And kind of in staying, first of all, I want to say thank you for the work that the sheriff's office is doing in the community. I know we're all really grateful for that. And let's kind of stay in the same vein of resources. And Jeff, I'll kick this over to you. Talk to us about what's going on in our school system by way of providing resources to our students about drugs and alcohol use.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, we recognize that we have to have very strong community connections, that this is not something that we can tackle alone. We have 2,500 students at the high school, so we can't monitor every restroom stall and every nook and cranny of the school. So it's very important for us to work very closely with our sheriff's office, with the judicial system, with the Forsyth County Drug Awareness Council, and the Drug Summit that's going to be coming up on October 24th at 6 p.m. Our mentoring programs, our United Way funding, that's a big part of it. But we do have very specific curriculum, and we try to make sure it's level appropriate. Moving forward, we see social and emotional health and addressing that with all of our students at every level is probably the key. So we're talking about responsible decision making, making best choices throughout your life, giving students confidence in their ability to make those choices. Those are going to be more positive for students down the road and in the moment than anything else. We certainly have very specific drug awareness type programs and curriculum. We have Too Good for Drugs in our middle schools in coordination with our sheriff's office. Students have to take an alcohol and drug awareness program, and even though it is basic awareness, it has a lot to do with driving under the influence and those statistics, excuse me. We have our CHAMPS program, choosing healthy activities and methods for promoting safety. We lean very heavy on programs that are dealing with character, like Leader in Me and Habitudes and the 7 Mindsets. So again, it's not so much drugs are bad, just say no, don't do drugs. That message is very critical. We see the educational piece as the curriculum and programs that we're working with right now.
That's great. Those are good resources. We appreciate those being in our school system. Kind of the last one when it comes to resources is Matt. Tell us about what the Youth Development Committee is doing to help provide resources and education to the community.
So the Youth Development Committee is a committee that's part of the Forsyth County Drug Council, and the action steps that we are beginning to take is we are working with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department and working with a county-wide effort in prescription takebacks. And the Forsyth County Police Department has already started a program, and we're looking for ways to expand that. The other thing that we're looking to do is getting drug and alcohol awareness or abuse and awareness into the school system. We're going to be doing different speaking engagements to parents and to students. We're going to have young people in recovery come in and tell their story to students and parents. So we're going to be doing a lot this year in getting the word out. The other thing is the Forsyth County Drug Awareness Council is partnering with the University of Georgia to be putting together a video that really highlights the dangers in the epidemic of the prescription drugs, and as well as the dangers of the drug and alcohol abuse epidemic that we're experiencing currently. And those videos will be available on ForsythCountyDrugAwarenessCouncil.com soon.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for those resources as well. I look forward to seeing that grow. So let me ask kind of a last question. We're going to wrap up here. We're kind of out of time. But I want to ask kind of a difficult question to keep short, but a couple of you guys and ladies can answer this if you like. Sherry, we'll start with you. But kind of a two-pronged question. As a parent, here's probably what I'm thinking the most. Number one, I hear about this raging epidemic of addiction, and so that concerns me because I love my child. And so, number one, what signs and symptoms should I be looking for to know if it's going on with my child? And then once I find out that they're using or catch them, what do I do now? So what am I looking for? And when I see what I'm looking for, what next?
I think one of the first things we saw was you'll notice like a change in behavior. So even before you would see things like their eyes may look funny, you know, if they come home high, you'll see maybe have a drop in grades where they did have better grades, or skipping school. Those are usually early signs that they're starting to drift away from their principles. They may sneak out, and then you'll start to see some of the physical signs as they start to use, where they're just edgy and you think it's teenage hormones, and then you realize that it's more than that. And it's kind of hard to decipher that in the beginning because you think, okay, it's just like a teenage phase, but they're actually withdrawing from something that they're using, even pot. So as far as now, I caught them with drugs, now what do I do?
Sure.
I totally agree with Heather. I don't think you can overreact. I would get them in to see someone that can really evaluate them and figure out whether they have the heredity for it. You know, there's a biological component to it. Do they have a lot of addiction in their family? What are they taking? When Matt met with my son for the first time, we thought he was doing something totally different. Matt had him for 20 minutes and told me that he was shooting heroin. We were like, what? what is heroin? So you'll be surprised at how quickly sometimes their addiction can progress if they really have that addictive, personality or biology behind it. And then get help for yourself as a parent, because it's really easy early on to enable them. You don't think you are, but you don't know what to do. And if you don't have other strong parents that have been there to help back you up, you're going to continue to make the same mistakes and buy into their lies. So like they'll want to leave you put them in a program, they want to leave a program. Everybody here is crazy. I'm not really that addicted. I'm not that bad. They'll have every excuse in the book, and if you don't have support, it's really easy to get sucked into their lies.
That's great. Let's hear from one more if we got it.
I wanted to piggyback off that when you're bringing your kid for help, one of the most important things that I always tell parents is it's not one size fits all. My parents brought me to several different counselors before they found one that I really connected with. Unfortunately, not due to anything wrong that they did, I had a really hard time connecting with the first several counselors that my parents brought me to. And I just tuned them out. I didn't listen. But the point is my parents kept trying to bring me to people until they found someone that really connected with me.
That's great.
The other thing I'd add too is that the average first use in the country is 10 years old. That's really young. Just like you were saying, you're finding it more and more in the middle schools. So most of the time when parents find something, your kids have gotten sloppy. So I call it the tip of the iceberg, which is that you find something, you find marijuana, they get arrested, you find alcohol. There are usually many, many more things that they've been doing that you're not aware of. So again, it's hard for parents. What you said was so important. Educate yourself. If you don't understand it, it's hard to talk to your kids about it. If you don't know what they're doing, if you don't know that they're dabbing, if you don't know that they can smoke Smarties, if you don't know what synthetic drugs are that you can buy at the convenience stores, you educate yourself about these things so you know what you're up against, and then take it seriously. Go get help, and it's hard. It's that overreaction. Not my kid. Because the other side of it's not my kid, I don't want it to be my kid, is, oh my God, how much pain there comes with it, it's my kid. So it's just important to take it seriously. And I think finding things, the other thing I wanted to just add is that I did the first, I've worked in the field for over 30 years. The first 10 to 12 years of my career, I did consulting work at a facility where we treated addicted physicians. So often grades aren't really a measure of whether your kid's got addiction problems or not. These were all individuals that could have been early intervened on and early diagnosed. But because they had good grades and were able to get into undergrad med school and excel, they didn't get into trouble until later on in life when they were now at risk of ruining the careers they'd worked so hard to build.
Yeah, I just want to broaden it because we have the drug problem, but 70% of the kids that get into drugs also have attention deficit disorder, depressions, they've been bullied, they've got post-traumatic stress. I mean, you have all these other problems, and I don't mean to say, oh, we'll treat his depression and he won't want to use pot. No, he's using pot because he loves pot, okay, but he also may be depressed. And we also have to look at those types of multiple factors and issues that need to be considered in that whole decision of what they need and what type of program.
The strong correlation between trauma and kids who are going to
Absolutely.
use later.
Kids that have been sexually abused, physically abused, and parents often don't know about it. I mean, it happened, uncle or where they were at the playground, things that happen and whatnot, and bullying at schools. I mean, and I'm sure you have that's a hot issue, but it's so prevalent, and we have internet bullying.
Cyberbullying.
The cyberbullying is just horrendous, and it's crazy. You can't make sense out of it. So you've got to look at the child and teenager in that total context, but the drugs are an entity of itself that isn't going to be cured by taking care of this other, but they need to be looked at and also may need to be treated.
Absolutely. And so I'm grateful for this panel. I like not only is there education, is there resource, but there's also experience on this panel, people that have been through it. And so we're really grateful for all of you taking your time today. As I'm listening as a parent, I'm looking for a way to kind of summarize these thoughts. And I would say this, 3 L's, easy way to remember would be to lean in, to learn, and to listen. So lean in, don't be afraid of overreacting. learn. There's community resources, and everybody mentioned some of those resources, and then listen. I loved your point about not being defensive as a parent and taking it personal, but listening. So if I'm a parent, lean in, learn, and listen. So thank you to all the panelists, and also I'd like to just say that on behalf of Forsyth County Schools and the Forsyth County Drug Awareness Council, thank you for joining us today. And then there's also some additional resources that are available in the Forsyth County Schools Parent Toolbox. This will be available, and also the Forsyth County Drug Awareness Council's webpage. So thank you.